So I've discussed war flags in the past. These are flags specifically used for war. Usually it's just a slight variation from the nation's flag, but there's also a whole other genre of flags that I've never discussed. These are what is known as culture flags. They can help symbolize different ethnic groups around the world, and sometimes the culture flag is the same as the national flag. This is because they're known as a homogeneous nation with shared culture, ethnic, religious, and linguistic backgrounds. So some culture flags aren't that interesting. For example, Scotland. I mean, I guess I shouldn't say it's not interesting. It's just nothing different from what we've seen before. But then there's the flag of the Spaniards, which should feel kind of familiar, even if you've never seen it before. That is because it's literally just Spain's flag without the coat of arms. Remember, this country has more than just Spaniards living in it. One of the more famous of them, the Castilians, and they're not using the Catalonian flag. So yes, sometimes the culture flag does differ. Sometimes you can find the roots from other historical flags used as well. But for me, this is where culture flags start to get really interesting. So this is the flag of the Greeks. It's obviously the exact same as the nation of Greece. And this is the flag of Albanians, again, the same as Albania. But then there's also a third flag of Albanian Greeks. And you can see where these two flags have kind of been combined. Now, this is also a flag for an autonomous region in that area. It's very likely some of these smaller places in area are homogenous as well. This is the flag of the Turkish people, but this is recognized as the Iraqi Turkmen flag. They make up 10 to 13% of Iraq's population. Here's the flag of the Croats, or the people that live in Croatia. Another one where it's the exact same. But here's the flag of Serbian Croatians. I didn't know they still had some of those. These are ethnic Croats in Serbia, about 40,000 of them. Then here's the flag of the Bosnian Croats. Again, just like last time, these are Croats that are now living in Bosnia. There's obviously a lot more of those. A lot of this stems back to the days of Yugoslavia, so there's a lot of different cultural flags here. Basically, you have to take your people's flag and then have a fusion with whatever country you're in. So there's just so many different variations. Here's the flag of Ukrainian Belarusians, or Belarusians living in Ukraine. Again, with their shared history with the Soviet Union, there's going to be a lot of crossover here. The flag of the Romanian minority in Serbia. This is interesting because they threw in the European Union stars in the corner. I'm also not getting like any Serbian vibes from this at all. I want to point out some of these cultural flags have been lost to time. They might not be used anymore, but they were used in the past. Here's the flag of Mongolian Kazakhs, or Kazakhs living in Mongolia. These culture flags would be perfect if, for whatever reason, some of these countries just formed a union one day. Well, maybe I shouldn't say perfect, because this is only supposed to represent the Kazakhstani people in Mongolia, but this is like a base to start off with. There's the many different flags of the Berbers, or groups that are scattered all along North Africa. So they might be a shared culture, but their communities are spread all around. In that very same vein, we have the cultural flags of Jewish people. Obviously, this one probably the more familiar one to us, but then there's one of my personal favorite. I always love to show this one off. This is the flag of the Jewish Autonomous State in Russia, or basically Russia's Israel, which they happen to throw that all the way over here in the corner next to China. Obviously, some of these cultural flags of ethnic groups are used to represent possibly a movement, like an independent country. Here are the Kurds. Who knows if they'd actually use that flag if they were to find their own nation here. Since there's plenty of examples of people not doing that, this is the ethnic group of Macedonians, yet the nation they live in, North Macedon, uses this flag instead. So there are differences sometimes between, obviously, the culture flags and the national flags, and that's probably because Macedonians only make up less than 60% of their overall population. It just gets really confusing because everyone from North Macedon is known as a Macedonian, but you might not necessarily be a part of the Macedonian ethnic group. So I guess maybe that's why they have different flags. Almost a quarter are just Albanians. Get ready for this. This is the flag of hamburgers. I'm not joking. This is seriously the flag of hamburgers. Or people who come from Hamburg, Germany. They obviously speak Hamburger dialect. I'm so immature for laughing at that joke. I'm sorry. I just won't ever not be funny that we have hamburgers in the world that are living. Speaking of which, these are Oldenburgers. Again, another area in Germany. I love this culture flag because it just looks like two boots. This is a municipality and village inside of Czechia. This might surprise a few people. There are even culture flags of U.S. states. So New Mexico represents the ethnic group of Neo-Mexicanos, as well as the U.S. state of Oklahoma. That state flag also represents the culture flag of Okies. It's clear to me that not all these different ethnic groups have come together and chosen a specific flag to represent their culture. Clearly, sometimes it's just whatever the flag is of the place they're at. I like the way some of this is labeled. The flag of Swedish-speaking Finns. Very specific there. They're not necessarily from Sweden. So this is a cultural flag, yes, but it's mainly a linguistic flag. Glad they kept with the Nordic themes there. That gives me a whole other video to do. We have to do linguistic flags next, which I don't think would be that interesting, but, you know, how many really are there? Yeah, we've already seen so many of these before. This culture flag represents a group of people in Africa, but it's obviously giving me a lot of Japanese vibes. It's just without the red dot that's supposed to represent the sun. This is the Bete people in Nigeria or the Ivory Coast. There's 3 million of them. This is the cultural flag of the Zulu people. Again, just want to point out, not all of these are official. It's just one of the designs. The infamous Zulu nation has had actually a couple different designs in the past, obviously. Looking up the Anglo-Zulu War, which is where most people know them from, they're actually not represented with this specific flag here. This is definitely one of the cooler cultural flags I've seen. Just a really cool elephant from the Bunda people group in Africa. This is like in Angola or parts of Zambia. Needless to say, there are tons and tons of cultural flags in South Asia, and this is just because there's so many different ethnic groups inside of India. If you didn't know, there's so many different languages as well. This is actually why this part of the world stayed very divided historically until the British came and forcibly unified all of it. But it's actually an incredibly diverse region. So there's literally like dozens and dozens of cultural flags coming out of this area. Some with some pretty cool designs as well. This region of China known as Inner Mongolia, they also have a group of people with their own cultural flag. They're known as Southern Mongolians. And I have to say, this flag is pretty cool, adding the yellow circle and then the red flame here. Literally a direct throwback to the Mongolian Empire. Obviously, the current national flag of that country does not look like that. The cultural flag for South Koreans living in Japan, these people specifically immigrated before 1945 or the end of World War II. They're actually the second largest ethnic minority in Japan, just behind China, but that shouldn't be surprising considering geography. And there's just so many different flags of different people groups that I've never seen before. Some of these designs are so cool. Like when it comes to Vexillology, I feel like more people should reference cultural flags. There's so many interesting little ideas happening here. I like how the cultural flags will stick to like flag trends, like whether it be like with the moon for Islamic nations or the Nordic cross if you're coming from that part of the world. Did not realize the Tagalog people from the Philippines had a face on their flag, which I find super interesting because I was going to make a reference to these South American nations with faces on their flag, obviously Argentina being one, and both of those places were under the Spanish Empire. So is this how the face on flags became a thing? I have to say I now enjoy having creepy faces on flags. Well, some are not that creepy, I'm just saying. Look how blue the Micronesian cultural flags are, which shouldn't be surprising. These are island nations, obviously very focused on the sea. A lot of people from Australia and New Zealand have brought over some of the themes from, well, I guess their ancestors' countries like Wales, England, Scotland. This is a crazy flag here from the Inuit people. There's a Native American tribe that looks exactly like Germany. Oh boy, had to throw this one in there. And keep in mind, this ethnic group is actually from America, specifically parts of Panama and Colombia. I know that symbol is often associated with Hindu, but no, not all the time. Well, I mean, it's obviously associated with something way more, but then everyone assumes after that it's Hindu. I guess, yeah. And here's some European Americans. I've seen definitely some of these before. I could probably fly maybe some of these myself a little bit. Falkland Islanders. Oh, this is an interesting one. This is the former South Vietnamese flag. And if your ancestry is from Vietnam, but you're now living in America, you are likely from the southern part. Not all the time, but likely. So it's really interesting the way these flags are connected. Sometimes they are cultural flags, but also they're historical national flags. That really is like the symbol of Vietnamese, at least here in the US. You'll never see the North Vietnamese flag or the current Vietnamese flag in the US. So it's interesting the way that evolved to becoming a cultural flag. Oof, Southern Americans with this cultural flag. Again, not everyone is using it. A lot of these flags can be controversial. That was not obvious enough by now. And then historical people groups. It's funny that even in history, you know, there's obviously, well, you know, again, sometimes you're just kind of associated with the national flag that they have. But yeah, this is a whole genre of this topic that I've never even touched upon. I learned a lot today. And big thanks to my patrons this month.
Drew, je suis ton père de retour avec le lait, regarde dehors.
DOOCHBAGGINS,
Amateur Archaeology,
Carmel
Connor,
Ich kann ohne Drecksstimme nicht schlafen.
Fredrik Tibblin,
Henrik Hedlund,
InquisitorXarius,
DaBeautiful-MEGAN-Underwood,
JohnDenver,
KirinoIsBestGirl,
KirinoIsBestGirl,
Sebby,
The Mexicans,
and
760.
ZaneyBoi.